composing gloves here, and today we're going to be looking at some Andrew Scheps style processing. And what I mean by that is his processing for a vocal chain, which is very popular. It is to put an EQ, but this is all being done in parallel. So you got your original vocal take, and then we're going to squish the vocal via a compressor and then mix it in. But he does an extra step. He puts an EQ before and drives the high end more so that the compressor responds to that high end. And then he puts an EQ after to rebalance the squashed vocal, and then he mixes that in. And by layering in something with a lot more sustain and something that is compressing harder on the high end, you wind up getting something that usually sits on top of a mix a lot better. Now, we're not going to be doing it on vocals because there's just a lot of videos out there on how to do it with vocals. And there's also videos talking about the original hardware he used, and I mean everything if you want to find it. I'm more interested in the idea and applying it to other sounds because it can work on other things. So here I've got this bass sound. It sounds like this. It's kind of one of my more wonky, glitchy kind of tracks. I go ahead and bypass this, which the DragonFire by Denise Audio is kind of exactly what we need for this because they've got the push-pull system, and that's pretty much it. The push would be the EQ before, DragonFire itself is a compressor, and then we have the pull at the end, which is like the EQ afterwards. This is the original. And then here it is after. So it's a lot more tonally balanced. There's not so much heavy low end. And this is something I'd also like to automate on and off. You can also do some kind of funny similar things with upwards and downwards compression if you're familiar with the OTT. But anyways, let's dive into setting something like this up and sort of how it works, the idea behind it. So I'm going to go ahead and bypass this. We're going to go for DragonFire and load this up here. I'm going to get it a bit bigger so we can see it. All right, so what we're going to do is first we are going to put it in solo mode. So this is multi-band compression versus wideband compression, meaning just the whole signal being compressed. We're just going to use single band compression. That's all we need. There we go, single band. It's a bit better way of saying that. The curve, I'm going to go ahead and bring up. And what we're going to do is we want to reduce the low end so that the compressor is not being driven by this. And these two outer nodes are already shelving filters. So we could just grab these and bring them up. And you're going to want to set these where a lot of your interest is. So we're going to cut out the low end so that the low end doesn't drive the compressor. And then we're going to boost the high end. And I sort of want to boost more of the mids too. You might use a peaking filter to create an interesting bump. And if we play this as it is right now. And also we're going to remove the pull. So this is just as if we're just pushing all the way and it's hitting the compressor right now. And you get what you expect, a very high-end driven compression. And what we're going to do now is really quick, just look at your threshold and decide where you want to set this. Do you want to just take off the peaks? This is going to have more an effect on the attack a little more, especially if you have quick attack and release settings. If you bring this down just a tad more, it'll have some more sustain since it won't constantly be going around that threshold. And from here, now what we could do is we could begin to pull back some of this setting to tonally rebalance what we've done here. And keep in mind, we're still at 100% mixed. So we're going to just pull this back some and just, you listen for a sweet spot. At this point, you might also mess with the graph and see if you might want some more of those low mids in there or not. This is going to depend on the material you have where you set this. If it's like a piano sound and you just want to get crazy with the piano, well, then you're going to probably move this like way higher up, depending on the range that you're playing in. You also are going to want to look at your ratio and decide if you want to push the ratio harder or not. I'm going to go ahead and bump the ratio up just a little bit more aggressively. So just give you a really squashed version of the sound. All right, so from here, I'm now going to bring down the mix. And this is just going to supplement what we already have. We're layering it in parallel, and you've essentially done the process. So it's all being done. You don't even have to change screens ever. Like, it's pretty nice. And at this point, you can begin to experiment with some other settings. Something I also like to sometimes do is bring down the clipping and then give it a little gain boost at the end. And if we go ahead, layer this in, at this point, we'd also want to make sure that we're doing gain matching. But this was before. And here's after. I mean, after you listen a little bit more, you start making adjustments. It's one of those things where you can mix forever. And then in context, let's go ahead and hear how it sounds with the whole mix going. Here it was before. And here's one that I took a little bit more time setting up. So I actually settled on a notch partway through, pulse sitting at 60%, and we've got the threshold actually a bit lower. Ratio is extremely similar, and everything else is more or less the same. I did not use the clipping move, and I have the release time a tad bit shorter and a slightly longer attack time. And let me show you the difference between those. So here is one that I sort of took more time setting up and just listening to until I was kind of happy. And if we bypass this, see how it still pops out. Like in this case, I don't need it to help it come out of the mix. There's not a lot going on, but it does sit quite a bit nicer with this on, and it captures more of the interesting tone instead of letting the low end just sort of run a little bit higher than I would like. So that is a little bit on some Andrew Scheps style processing, a little bit on the push-pull technique. Really interesting technique to use on a lot more than just a vocal. You could use it on all kinds of things. If you have any questions about this, feel free to let me know, subscribe, and have a blessed day.